Hey everybody, Kaylee Fretz here. I had a problem over the weekend. I was working on my bike and I snapped a little arm off of a very, very old repair stand that I've had for a while. And so I had to go buy a new one. Now, lucky for me, I am an Escape Collective member. And so I headed over to the Escape Collective member purchase program page, escapecollective.com/member-purchase-program. And I saw that Feedback Sports offers 25% off to all Escape Collective members. Great. So I went to the Feedback Sports website, shopped around a little bit. The Pro Mechanic bike repair stand looks pretty good to me. I went and grabbed the code from the member purchase program site, dropped it in at checkout, and lo and behold, the Pro Mechanic bike repair stand from Feedback Sports, instead of being $395, is now $296.25. So I've just saved myself almost $100, which, for those of you out there doing the math, is an entire year of Escape Collective membership. I think you're probably picking up what I'm laying down here, which is that the Escape Collective member purchase program pays for itself pretty darn quickly. If you're buying a kit, if you're buying wheels, if you're buying a new repair stand, make sure you are a member and make sure you're using your member purchase program codes, or else you're just wasting money. Head over to escapecollective.com/join, sign up today, get your member purchase program codes, and start shopping.
Welcome back to the Performance Process Podcast. I am your host, Ronan McLaughlin, and today we're revisiting one of the most discussed aspects of bike fit in recent years, that is crank length. Today's guest is someone who's been quietly rewriting some of the rules of bike fit from the crank up. Matt Appleman is a frame builder, composite engineer, and founder of Appleman Bicycles, where he's known for obsessively customizing every detail of a rider's fit and equipment. Matt's fascination with crank length, and specifically lengths shorter than those which are typically offered by the industry, comes from seeing comfort, injury prevention, and using crank length as a performance tool, opening up hip angles, sustaining more aggressive aero positions, and reducing injury risk for riders chasing every last gain. After years of working with riders to solve chronic knee and hip issues, including his own, Matt developed the 2XR crankset, offering a range of crank lengths from 135mm all the way up to 175. A spread he says actually matches the diversity of riders who pedal. So Matt, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always fun to be on and talk about crank length.
Yeah, you're a big fan of the crank length conversations.
I am. It's amazing how it's like the one thing on the bike that hasn't changed for 100 years, hardly, or it has changed just this much.
5mm.
Yeah,
here or there.
when riders are, such a huge variety of bodies and body types and disciplines, but yet everyone's riding almost the same length crank.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hilarious as well. And like, as I've been preparing for this show, I've been prepping some notes and doing up a plan that I've shared with you. And even just thinking about it now, I just went for a ride before we met here. And, we fascinate over so much, everything else in terms of our bike fit and saddle height up and down and fore and aft and angle and all this stuff, and a rider would never consider riding a saddle too low or something like that, but suggest to them that we change your crank length by 2.5mm, and all of a sudden it's really, really scary stuff. And the idea is that we're going to lose all this power and it's going to cost us so much performance. And actually, as you've been saying for a long time, perhaps we've just had it wrong all along.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a nutshell, my idea on crank length is that, just like saddle height or frame size or handlebar width, it should be somewhat proportional to the rider. A smaller rider should have smaller cranks and a bigger rider should have bigger cranks. It sort of, I often tell people it's like the industry is kind of saying that everybody needs to wear a shoe size 9 or 10 is basically what the offering is now. And some people that fits great. Probably a lot of people that works great, but a lot of people, they're way too big or way too small. And I think, we can do better.
That's the key there, isn't it? It's the proportionality to the size of the rider. Because I made my own point badly a second ago. What I was trying to say was we wouldn't suggest that a fixed range of saddle heights would suit all riders. But the idea of straying outside a fixed range of crank lengths is scary to all riders. And I've seen you quoted somewhere elsewhere with some fascinating stats in terms of like the range and sizes of frames and the range and sizes of handlebars, and everything is like 20 and 30% difference in terms of the range. And then cranks, we have like a 6% difference, which
6%. Yeah. I know it's pretty amazing. So almost everything on the bike is in that 20 to 30%. Stems, handlebar width, frame size, you name it. And then even you look at people's height or inseam length, like their leg length, and that's about 25%, give or take, a range between tall people and short people. And then there's crank length at 6%. How does that help people? I'm not so sure, but that's one of the reasons I got into doing the cranks. I started out with a knee injury in college, which led me to a custom frame. I hacked together something where I have a very slack seat tube angle, and that helped recruit more of my backside, butt and hamstring musculature, and took some stress off my knees, which were really overstressed. And that was pretty good, but it wasn't until I started experimenting with shorter and shorter cranks that, I rode 172.5 my whole life. Then I went down to 165, and that was a lot better. I could ride further and a little bit harder, but I still had quite a bit of knee pain. This was still probably 5 or 6 years after my initial injury. So I could ride, but not how I wanted to. And then there's a local guy here in Minnesota who he takes kind of lower end cranks and will drill a new hole. They were 180s, and then he would drill a new pedal hole and tap it. And I to 155. So I started riding that. And then with my custom frame and the crank length, then my knee pain went away. I could ride as hard as I wanted, as long as I wanted, for the first time in many, many years.
Wow.
So that's when
When was this?
This was about 2014.
Okay, and you've been on 155s ever
and
since?
I've been on 155s ever since. Yeah. So I started Appleman Bicycles building custom frames in 2010. So after that, I started, customers who were open to the idea. I started speccing like 155s or shorter cranks on their custom frames, and they loved it. And it kind of got to the point where, I want short mountain bike cranks or a short fat bike crank, or I want this or that, or I don't want a red bolt. So I started thinking, well, maybe this is something, I could do. And in 2022, I came out with the 2XR crank set. And I thought I was being silly. I tried the 145 cranks just because now I have a full range of cranks at my disposal. Yeah. So I thought I'd try them, and I absolutely loved them. And that's still what I ride now. Wow. is 145, and I'm 6'1", so quite tall.
I want to ask you about the 2XR cranks, and because I have a set of them here for review, and they're just absolutely beautiful. Before I do though, just on that very point, like, do you think there is a lower limit? Like, you're over 6 foot yourself. You're, I think, well, you are over 6 foot, aren't you?
Yeah, 6'1", 6'2". Yep.
And you're on 145s now. Is there?
Yeah.
Is like,
I think,
where does it stop? Do you think?
So I would say, okay. So first of all, there is no optimum crank length. That doesn't exist in my mind. There is a range that will work well for you, and I would say that's probably about 20 or 25 millimeters difference. So for me, when I would say kind of my top end, the ceiling, the high end of what I can ride comfortably without pain is 155. And so I would say, yeah, I could do 135 and enjoy that. I don't need to. That's just sort of excessive. Any shorter than that, I'd for sure just be going shorter just for the sake of going shorter, which I don't think you need. But I would say the low limit, like a crank length that's too low, is going to very, very slowly fade performance. So there's almost not a too low without going excessive. I'm not saying everybody do 100 millimeter.
We maybe also get to a point where just you've gone to such a short crank length, it starts affecting other aspects of your bike fit, and you maybe end up maxing out what you can achieve with whatever fork steer you've got left since you've cut it at the original position, or other aspects like that, because you have to compensate saddle height for crank length adjustment and stuff like that. So perhaps that enforces a lower limit, but
that's one way, I think. I don't think there's a really hard lower limit, but there is a hard upper limit. Once you get to cranks that are too long, then performance, comfort starts decreasing pretty drastically. So if you're on too long of a crank, your hips are going to be rocking. You're probably going to be putting your saddle up too high to compensate for that. And if you don't, then your knee and hip angles, your knee is going to be so much more bent. Your hips are, your knee, your upper thigh is going to be closer to your chest when the crank is too long. And that basically just is your legs getting in the way of themselves if you're on too long of a crank. And it physically starts moving your whole body on the bike. We've probably all been on a group ride where there's that guy who rides all over the bike.
Yeah.
His crank lengths might be too long because they're essentially his cranks and his legs are like throwing him side to side. There's no stability. In bike fit, stability is king. If you're not stable, you can't push. So when you're, some riders will, even if they're on too long of a crank, they actually like lift their butt off the saddle on each side just a little bit because they literally can't get over the top of the pedal stroke just while maintaining a stable position. Too long, yes, you can be. You can also ride with too long, and I think it is possible for many people. I think a lot of people are on too long of a crank and they just don't know any different.
Yeah, I mean,
but I also don't suggest going too low just to,
for the sake of it,
just for the sake of going short. Yeah. There's a balance, and everybody's different. So you can't really, too long for you might be 190. And for me, it's 155. And for someone listening, who knows what it could be, 165. And I've found, we might talk about this a little later too, but when testing different cranks, when you do go to a short or appropriate length crank for you, I've found a lot of riders are kind of ho-hum about it. Like, I don't know. Yeah, it feels all right. It's pretty good, I guess. But then they go back. They go back to what they were riding, and it feels absolutely terrible. And they can feel their hips rocking, and their whole body lights up. And that's when they realize, oh, those slightly shorter cranks are way more comfortable. But sometimes that initial so I think when you are testing cranks, switching often is helpful.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I find myself switching quite a bit just because some of the review bikes that we get sent now, the manufacturers are sort of copping onto this, and you're starting to see somewhat shorter cranks. And like 3-4 years ago, it was just my size came with 172 cranks and nothing else. Now some of the bikes will come with 165s, some of them will come with 170s, some will still come with 172 and a halves. So I'm switching about quite a lot, and for that reason, I think within that range, I don't feel much of a difference. But I have been down to 155, and as you say, going back. I think there's something about you can keep going smaller and smaller and notice almost no difference. But the second you start going bigger again and you're moving outside a range of motion that you're used to, I think there's something in that yeah, the body just goes, oh, wait a minute, this is, well, it was different before. I was fine with that because it was different, easier.
Well,
This is different, harder. I don't like it.
when you go shorter, you're keeping everything inside a certain range of motion. And then if you were to go to a longer crank or just testing shorter to longer, now you're kind of expanding that range of motion, and that's a lot more uncomfortable.
Anyway, I wanted to ask you about the 2XR cranks. Because you have sent me a set, and you've also sent me a set of the 2XR Fit cranks. And I have both of them here. Have had a bit of bottom bracket compatibility issues that have delayed me getting them on a bike, but finally we also have bottom brackets here that will fit the bike that I have here at the moment. But, as you just alluded to there, the whole journey you went through with short cranks inspired you to then design these 2XR cranks. So do you want to, for those who haven't seen them, can you give us a podcast description of the cranks?
Overview. So it's they're a very modular crank set. So there's crank arms. They come from 100 millimeters to 175. The 100 is really just for extreme cases or people with prosthetics, knee replacements, birth defects. But so the bulk of the cranks that I sell are 135 to 175. I sell, along with that, there's spindles, which goes through the bottom bracket, and those are in 5 different widths. So road, gravel, mountain bike, kind of like a downhill or mid-fat bike, and then a fat bike spindle. So you get the full width. And then I don't even know how many spiders I offer anymore. It's a lot. Everything from 110 by 5, kind of a classic road, to direct mount chain rings, to a track spider, 130 by 5, GRX, Shimano road, SRAM, all sorts of things. And then there's some little spindle bolts in the ends of it that kind of help keep everything together. So the beauty of the modularity is that it fits all bikes pretty much, almost all riders, almost all drivetrains, and it takes about 5 minutes if you were to switch crank arms from one bike to another. So yeah, it's and then I designed everything around a 5 millimeter Allen key. So to adjust the cranks or switch cranks between bikes, you just need a 5 millimeter Allen wrench. And the torques are all fairly low and reasonable, so you don't need a giant crowbar to remove your crank.
Or a tube.
Or a tube, or you don't need a friend to hold one end and you hold the other. Oh, and all of those come in 10 different colors.
I was wondering when you're going to get to the colors, because that's all great, but it's the colors that people notice.
Yeah. So I sometimes I forget about the colors, but yes, there's a full rainbow of colors. So yeah, my goal was to build the crank set that I wanted as a frame builder, so I could fit a lot of people and a lot of different kinds of bikes and a lot of different drivetrains, and not be stuck with a red bolt that I didn't want. Or crazy laser graphics that were really ugly. So I try to keep it subtle, and you can have pink and turquoise or gold and purple, whatever colors you want.
How's the color applied? Because it's not anodized or something, or it's not.
Nope. Yeah, I don't use an anodized. I use a really high-end water-based polyurethane. So it's essentially a paint or a coating. And then just recently I got a new paint. It's the same paint, but with a ceramic additive to it. So that's going to increase the wear of it quite a bit. And going that way, going the polyurethane way. So just it allows me to coat all the different colors. You can't achieve most of my colors strictly through anodization. And then I can also offer the full range of, I think there's something like 49,000 or 500,000 different, color combinations if you looked at every possible combination of option I have. So it kind of lets me keep everything local. I hand finish all the cranks myself. So I'll do some sanding, deburring, cleaning, and then painting whatever color gets ordered. And then the laser engraving and shipping is something I do all in-house. So
wow.
I don't. Even when you order black cranks, they're not just sitting on a box on the shelf. So I still touch everything. And there's a bit of handiwork. The frame builder in me won't quite die, so I need to keep doing handiwork to make the cranks work. So
Well, yeah, I think the colors are, as I've said a couple of times, the cranks are worth it for the color choice alone. But then the modularity also, and then the size range that you offer, I think, just makes them, provide an offering that isn't really available elsewhere. I've no doubt with the trend, so to speak, as it catches on, we probably will see the big group set manufacturers start to dabble in shorter cranks. Once the demand's there, I'm sure they'll be in to try and snatch some of that. But they'll have a long way to go to make a set of cranks that's nice looking.
Yeah, I agree. And with going back to the T word, trend. I know what people mean, that it's a trend and popular, but I would argue that bike fit is not a trend. Like good bike fit or better bike fit is not a trend, which is my main impetus for making the cranks. Turquoise cranks, those could be a trend, I suppose. I'll give them that, but I really 165 is not a short crank length for the general riding population, and good bike fit is never going to be a trend.
Yeah, I suppose the issue with calling it a trend is that suggests that it will go away and we'll go back to 170s to 175s.
Yeah.
And this is, shorter cranks and is going nowhere. We should probably clarify when we say shorter. I think we're both referring to anything shorter than the 170, 172.5, and 175s that was pretty much ubiquitous for the past century, I think. So shorter than that, I know that 6% range you quoted earlier included 165s, which I thought was awful generous, because I think it's only of the past 10 years or so that 165s have even been like,
I mean, I think it's only been a few years that kind of like from an OEM standpoint that they're offering 165s. And I still get calls, at least once a week, of someone calls me and say, yeah, I bought this, double extra small frame, and it came with 170s. And what were they thinking? I said, I know.
I think they were thinking they had a container full of 170s and they have to get rid of them somehow.
And that is like a real, I mean, I've kind of heard, because I've got my ear to the ground on crank length, everything. And, there's people who do try to spec shorter cranks on smaller bikes. And some of the manufacturers say, we'll sell you 170s. I say, no, 165, please. And they say 170. Okay. But yeah.
There's a lot of, again, supply and demand, and there's probably a premium to be paid for 165s and shorter versus there's no bikes coming with 180s, but I'm sure you could pick up a set of 180 cranks pretty cheap these days.
Yeah. I mean, I sell like my 175s are the least popular crank length I sell. 155 is the most popular.
we've said probably in the title that this podcast will offer a way to determine what is. You have said there's no such thing as optimal or the perfect crank length, but determining the right range of cranks you use. So we might we'll get back to discussing that, and I might just get us back in there by maybe just will we first just have you recap, what are some of the benefits that these shorter cranks, so to speak, do offer, and why just a simple change of crank length was able to solve a long injury issue for you. What is it about the length of the crank that does that?
Yeah. So the general benefits of you could call them appropriately length cranks,
yes.
which are often shorter for most people. Comfort is probably the biggest benefit, and that in turn also can turn into speed. If you're 70 miles into a race and more comfortable, again, going back to a shorter crank, you're literally moving less on the bike. Your legs are moving less, so you're going to have a better bike fit. The possibility to become more aerodynamic. So you reduce the crank length, which means essentially your hip angle opens, or another way of thinking of it is your knee is now further from your chest. So if you wanted to, you could rotate back down further to where you were comfortable, so you can essentially get a lower and lower position, which is generally more aerodynamic.
Yeah, it's not that the shorter cranks themselves are inherently more aerodynamic. It's that they maybe offer the opportunity to get into what appears to be a more aggressive position, but actually, the issue with an aggressive torso angle is that you end up with as you said, your thigh and your knee banging into your stomach and your chest. And if your crank is shorter, your thigh and your knee don't come as high, and so they don't. That gap between thigh, knee, chest, stomach, the whole works is opened up.
If you're very fit, it's getting in the way of your breathing. You don't want your legs or your general position on the bike to interfere with breathing. How much faster will you be if you can breathe more? That's a very difficult thing to measure. You can't put a power meter on that, but you probably could put a stopwatch on it. So there's a difference between speed and power. So your breathing will open up, which is generally very beneficial for an endurance sport. So more speed. The magic of crank length is almost all happens at the top of the pedal stroke. So all of when you set up, regardless of your crank length, you should have the same leg extension, or your knee should be bent the same amount at the bottom of the pedal stroke. So that's why you shorten your crank 20 millimeters. You should raise your seat about 20 millimeters. Could be 18, could be, but close to it. But then the cool part is if you shorten your crank 20 millimeters, you raise your seat 20 millimeters. And now at the top of the pedal stroke, that crank is also 20 millimeters shorter. But because you raised your seat, now your chest to your knee is now 40 millimeters further away. So there's something of a doubling effect at the top of the pedal stroke. And it's not having your knee as bent or your hips as closed or bent. At the top of the pedal stroke is, making it easier to get it. Nothing will eliminate a dead spot in the pedal stroke. There's no way to do that because your muscles are going from lengthening to shortening. So there's always going to be a dead spot, but the amount of power that you can start pushing through that dead spot can increase, or the amount of force. So it's all at the top of the pedal stroke. I think for me personally, I think having a straighter knee throughout the pedal stroke was very helpful, and what helped my injury. It's like on a long crank is like going deeper into a squat, and that puts more stress on the joints, your hips and your knees. If you're, hovering, if your butt's hovering above your ankle, you can do it maybe if you're quite fit, but it's a lot of stress on your knee versus if you're just going into a light squat, like sitting on a chair. It's not as deep, so there's less stress on the joints. Another way of thinking about it is, if like the stairs in your house, if you were a long crank would be like a taller stair, and a short crank, so there's going to be 10 steps to get up a floor in your house with a longer crank or a normal step, and maybe there's 13 steps, but they're shorter to get up. So that's kind of where you can look at, your cadence may increase, but you're still doing the same amount of work to get up a flight of stairs, regardless of how big the stairs are. You're just doing it with the shorter stairs. For many people, that's going to be less stress on your joints, and that would be injury prevention. If we stress our joints riding, thousands and thousands of times. So how much can you take before you get tendonitis or an injury is kind of key. So shorter cranks can help reduce that peak load on the joints and prevent injury and increase comfort. Even if you just get achy at the end of the ride, you shouldn't necessarily, just because it's kind of a suffering is so glorified in the sport that like your joints shouldn't really hurt after a ride. It's probably not a healthy thing for you. When you're riding and you do have a physique where you have a little more, something of a gut. I've been skinny my whole life, but I, since parenthood have gained a little bit of weight. It feels so nice to have shorter cranks, to not have that like gut massage where every pedal stroke, your legs are just sort of like ogling your stomach just a little bit. And I think it can be really beneficial and feel really good for a lot of people, especially who are much bigger than me, just to have a little bit of that less of a gut massage, and that helps with breathing as well. Is something that can help with shorter cranks. Sort of an odd one.
I was going to say it's sort of the same as the time trial, the aero position benefit.
It's very similar. Yeah. In the same line of thinking, same area of the body.
Okay, folks, that's where we're cutting off the free version of this podcast this week. Just a reminder, if you head over to escapecollective.com/member, you can sign up now and you can get the entire podcast uninterrupted. You'll not have me butting in to cut you off or to remind you that you're not yet a member. And in doing so, you will be helping to ensure this podcast continues for many more episodes and months and years to come. So head over escapecollective.com/member now to sign up to Escape Collective and to get the entire episode of Performance Process, along with all of the other podcasts and written content that we publish on our website.
Hey everybody, Kaylee Fretz here. I had a problem over the weekend. I was working on my bike and I snapped a little arm off of a very, very old repair stand that I've had for a while. And so I had to go buy a new one. Now, lucky for me, I am an Escape Collective member. And so I headed over to the Escape Collective member purchase program page, escapecollective.com/member-purchase-program. And I saw that Feedback Sports offers 25% off to all Escape Collective members. Great. So I went to the Feedback Sports website, shopped around a little bit. The Pro Mechanic bike repair stand looks pretty good to me. I went and grabbed the code from the member purchase program site, dropped it in at checkout, and lo and behold, the Pro Mechanic bike repair stand for Feedback Sports, instead of being $395, is now $296.25. So I've just saved myself almost $100, which, for those of you out there doing the math, is an entire year of Escape Collective membership. I think you're probably picking up what I'm laying down here, which is that The Escape Collective member purchase program pays for itself pretty darn quickly. If you're buying a kit, if you're buying wheels, if you're buying a new repair stand, make sure you are a member and make sure you're using your member purchase program codes, or else you're just wasting money. Head over to escapecollective.com/join. Sign up today, get your member purchase program codes, and start shopping.